You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 186. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. What would it mean to you to have a breakthrough year in 2025? It's a juicy question, I know, and one that I'm excited to explore with you further today. I predict that this coming year is going to be a breakthrough year for many of us, and you in particular, if that's what you choose to do. You may be sensing that you are ready for a breakthrough, right? You know already that it's time for a change, that you're ready to do things differently, and there may be opportunities that you've already spotted in your practice and maybe also in your personal life where you're ready to make a shift. Now, it may also be that you have that sense, right, of something's coming, something's going to be different, but you don't quite know yet what that looks like for you. And that's okay as well. Regardless, today's podcast episode is going to be really helpful for you because what we're going to do is we're going to take a step back. We're going to look at what a breakthrough year really means. And I'm going to offer some concrete steps for you to set out to actually design a breakthrough year. It's a bit of a novel concept for many of us. And so we're going to be specific about how we can go about creating it. So thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm thrilled to have you and thrilled to jump into this discussion with you. Before we do that, I'd love to let you know about a couple of opportunities we have to work together in the near future. So the first opportunity is a webinar. It's a workshop, and it's taking place on Thursday, December 19th at noon Pacific time. It is a workshop all about designing a breakthrough year in 2025. So if you're listening to this episode when it goes live, you'll have time to register. And what I would offer to you is that we will take concepts that we discussed today and we'll workshop them. We will apply them. And my goal for you in attending that webinar is that by the end of it, you'll have a really clear sense of what you've accomplished this year already. I think way too often we skip over what we've already done. We skip over our accomplishments. So we don't want to do that. We want to celebrate what you've done this year. And I want to set you up for a 2025 where you get to experience a breakthrough, right? And we'll get into details today about what that means. So if you'd like to join me, you're absolutely welcome to. I would love to have you there. The information to register will be with the show notes that come along with this episode. If you can't find the link to register, just send me a note and I would be delighted to send you the information. So that's opportunity number one. Now, opportunity number two is a group coaching and mastermind program that I'm offering in January. It is a 6-month program. So from January to June 2025, it will be a group of up to 8 women lawyers. Specifically, women who are in leadership or approaching leadership roles. So you're at a point in your practice where you feel a certain sense of authority. You may be working toward a specific leadership role, right? You may be on the verge of joining a partnership. You may be a partner and you're looking to solidify your leadership skills in that role. You may be looking to transition into more of a managerial or overseeing role within your organization. You get to be the judge of where you're at in your practice. The idea here is that you're looking to join a group where you can collaborate with smart, high-achieving, like-minded women lawyers on topics that each of you will bring to the table. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but the idea here is that you're going to come to this group with a goal. So each of you will choose a goal to work on, and then we will spend 6 months developing and working toward your goal. So to give you a sense of what you can expect, in January, you will work on creating your goal. We've got a process for you to set the goal that you have for the program. In February, we'll work on your self-concept. So who you need to be, who you need to become in order to achieve your goal. In March, we then turn to obstacles, which I think is one of the most profound exercises you can do, right? Anytime you set a goal that is beyond what you currently have, the obstacles are going to reveal themselves. And that's such a great opportunity for your own learning and development. In April, we talk about confidence, authority, and power. So many of the lawyers that I work with struggle with confidence. It's not that they are not confident, and it is not that they are not accomplished. Everybody that I have worked with in my practice has been incredible, and they are amazing and high achieving and successful. And yet sometimes there's this gap in confidence between where they are and where they want to be. And by closing that gap, there is so much that they can experience, that they can produce in terms of the impact that they have. And so that month is really focused on gaining awareness about where you rank yourself and focus on building that level of confidence so that you can feel more confident in your practice. You feel more aligned with your goals. You feel that sense of purpose. We talk also about authority and power and the relationship that you have with those in your practice as well. Finally, then we move into boundaries. So what you'll notice is that when you set a goal, when you set a priority that pushes away other things, you need to protect your priorities by setting boundaries. And so we spend a month talking about boundaries, how to create them, the language that you would use. We also talk about delegation, right? If you're trying to protect your time, you will also want to be relying on others, right, to support you. And so we'll also look at how you can delegate responsibilities and tasks and whatever it happens to be that will free you up to focus on your goals. And then finally, we talk about sustainable growth. So once we've put all of these different building blocks in a row and we've been building on those over the course of 5 months, in our 6th and final month together, we look at sustainable success, sustainable growth, because that is where a lot of lawyers struggle, right? Maintaining that work-life balance or integration, whatever you want to call it. How do you create a practice where you're growing, but you're not burning yourself out? So those are the different themes that we will explore together as a group. In addition, I also offer a couple of bonus classes, one on time management, which I tailor to the group, and one on transitions. So for a lot of lawyers, the transition might be a very clear job A to job B, role A to role B, but transition isn't always that clear cut. And sometimes it's more of an internal transition. And so I help you with the transition process and how you can manage that more effectively by understanding the different stages that you'll go through. And in addition to the group calls, so we have 2 group calls every month, we also have 2 individual coaching sessions. So they're an hour each for you and I to focus specifically on you and your goals for the program. So all the information is on a webpage that I will provide the link to in the show notes. So if that's something that you're interested in, by all means, please do check it out. If you have any questions about it, reach out to me. I am really excited to be hosting this program again. It truly is a magical container. I've had the privilege of working with many really amazing women. And if it's something that appeals to you, I would absolutely love to have you there. So with that, we're going to turn to today's topic, which of course is designing a breakthrough year. So we want to start by defining what a breakthrough year actually is. So the definition of breakthrough that resonated most with me for today's topic is one that I found on the online Oxford English Dictionary. And there are so many definitions of breakthrough. If you look it up, actually, you'll find there are lots. But I wanted a definition that reflected what I'm trying to capture here today. So I found it, and it is this: a sudden, significant advance in knowledge or achievement, an important development which removes an obstacle to progress. So this idea, now I do question now that I'm reading it more closely, this sudden significant advancement. I don't know that it needs to be sudden per se, but certainly there is an advance, right? There is this idea of achieving or gaining knowledge. Something shifts, right? So there's a gain that is a part of the breakthrough. And the part that I also want you to consider is the idea of removing an obstacle, right? And removing an obstacle to progress. To me, the breakthrough isn't just focused on the thing that you're achieving. The breakthrough is actually that breaking through process, right? Where there's an obstacle that's in the way and somehow we're going to remove it. So when it comes to the breakthrough year, then what I'd invite you to think about is, what would you be breaking through? What I think about is breaking free of something, right? Something that may have been holding you back. Maybe it's a habit or a fear or one of these limiting beliefs. And I don't like to use that terminology. I feel like it's a little bit cliche, but it's true, right? If there's a belief that you have about yourself that is holding you back, a breakthrough might be to be shifting that belief in yourself. It might also be uncovering a blind spot. I mean, you think of a fish in water, right? The fish do not see the water, just like you may not see the water in your organization, the water in your profession, right? If you think about how lawyers are conditioned and they work in a society with other lawyers, and there are certain things that we just accept as being the way that things are, and we no longer see them. And so sometimes it can just help to remove yourself from a situation in order to gain perspective. And when you see yourself from that perspective, you may notice that there are blind spots, things that you didn't even realize you were thinking or doing that have been holding you back. And a breakthrough, the way that I think about it, is something that changes you, right? It's shifting who you are at your identity level. It may have with it an increase in maturity, whether it's professional or personal maturity. You reach this new level, and it increases your self-confidence and it increases your self-trust. When you put yourself through a process where you overcome a barrier, it requires you to dig deep, and who you are on the other side of it is often someone who has overcome something quite difficult. And that results in an increase in your confidence in yourself and an increased trust in yourself. Now, what a breakthrough is not is equally helpful when trying to define what a breakthrough year could be. So a breakthrough, the way that we're talking about it today, is not doing more of the same. So if you think about yourself driving in a car, and let's say you're driving a standard car. Now, to be honest, I am so out of the loop in terms of car production. I really am. I drive a standard car. It's old by today's standards. It's not electric. I would like to get a new one, probably in the near future. But for now, I drive a stick shift, right? And I love it. I really enjoyed learning how to drive a standard car. And if you have ever driven standard and thinking about it now, I don't even know if they still make these, but anyways, then you'll know that you have to shift gears, right? You can get so far in gear 1 and then you'll reach a certain speed and it's time to press the clutch and shift into the next gear. And you do that every time you increase your speed, right? You get past the capacity of one of the gears and you need to move up to the next level. It's just like riding a bicycle. If you've got gears on your bikes, you might start out at one gear, and as you develop speed and momentum, you can increase the gears. And if you're going uphill, maybe you're starting in an easier gear. And if you're going downhill, you might switch to a different gear. So this idea of being in a standard car, for example, if you are pressing the gas and you're in first gear, you're only going to reach a certain speed before the engine starts to rev really high. It gets frustrated. It's not going to go faster though, right? The gas isn't going to help you move faster. So if you are thinking about a breakthrough year for you, the breakthrough isn't pressing more of the gas. The breakthrough is actually switching gears. And if you've ever driven standard, then at some point you had to learn how to do it. And it can be tricky. When you go from gear 1 to gear 2, you need to put your foot on the clutch. You need to make this transition. You need to put your foot back on the gas. So there's a bit of an art to that transition. It's tricky to learn. It's why people stall out. It's why occasionally I'll still stall out on a hill. So this process, right, this process of shifting gears is what I have in mind when I think of a breakthrough year. So we're not thinking about doing more of the same that's already been working. We're thinking about doing something new that's going to get you to a next level, a greater speed in the sense of a car, but there's something more that awaits you. Now, the other thing that a breakthrough is not, for the purposes of today's conversation, is that the breakthrough isn't necessarily changing the environment that you find yourself in so that you feel better. Now, this probably comes up most frequently in a conversation with lawyers around switching jobs. So if, for example, you're in a job where you feel like your boundaries are not being respected, you can go and get another job where you can start fresh and maybe your new organization will be really respectful of your boundaries. Or what you might find is you take yourself into your new job, and within a few months, what you realize is that you've taken the problem with you, right? All of a sudden, your boundaries are being violated and you're wondering how this is possible. You've switched environments. Why isn't anything changing? So the idea with the breakthrough isn't so much that you put yourself into a brand new container where things are easier for you. Now, that might be part of your breakthrough year, right? Part of your breakthrough year might be making a decision that requires you to change environments. That could be part of it. But that alone isn't necessarily going to lead you to the type of breakthrough that we're talking about today. So with that in mind, that idea of what a breakthrough is and what a breakthrough isn't, the question you might be asking yourself is, how do you know if you are poised for a breakthrough year, right? I mean, it might sound a little bit much, right? Okay, Paula, here you are talking about breakthrough years. What does that mean exactly? How do you know if you're ready? Well, before we go any further, I'd invite you to think about where you could have a breakthrough. And for today's discussion, I'd invite you to think about personal breakthroughs and professional breakthroughs. I don't think we can really separate who we are as humans from being professionals. You can't separate being a lawyer from being a human. I can't separate being a coach and a professional in that capacity to who I am as a person operating in my personal life. The two kind of go hand in hand. So if you think about what breakthrough would mean for you professionally, that might mean one thing, right? It might be stepping into a more expansive role. It might be stepping into more of a leadership role, taking on more responsibility. It might be giving away more responsibility. It might be setting those boundaries. It might be achieving that balance. It could look like so many different things depending on who you are, what your practice looks like, and where you see the opportunities for growth. Now, from a personal perspective, there are also opportunities for breakthroughs. It might be that you want to experience more joy and less stress in your day-to-day. It may be that you want to experience more satisfaction, right? You might always be seeing the glass as half empty, and you want to at least more frequently see the glass as half full. So what are some indicators in both of these spheres that maybe it's time for a breakthrough? I've got 3 different scenarios that might connect with you, and there are probably more, but the ones that we'll talk about here today, number 1 is that returning guest or that ongoing sense of stuckness. So the end of the year is a really great time for this particular type of breakthrough, or at least to notice this type of breakthrough, because what often happens at the end of the year is that we get into this reflective zone, right? We are wrapping up your year. You're probably, if you work in a billable system, you're wrapping up your billable hours. You're thinking about your files for the year. You're thinking about the fresh year that's about to start. Maybe you've got performance reviews that coincide with the end of the year. And so you've been setting goals for 2025. You've got your business plan. What are you going to do? So there's a lot of reflection that just seems to happen because of where we are at this time of year. And if you're listening to this podcast episode at another time of year, I would invite you to do that same type of reflection, because why not, right? You can reflect anytime. It doesn't need to be at a certain time of year. I just find that this is a time of year that people will often do it. I have developed a practice this year of doing a monthly reflection, and it's been really interesting for me to see month to month what I have accomplished, where the gaps are, and what I look forward to the next month on this topic in particular, right? The returning guests, the problems that don't seem to go away. I've noticed that when I set my intention for the next month, there are certain projects that I just haven't been able to turn my mind to, which is fascinating, right? It tells me a little bit about how I feel about those projects and whether or not they're worth pursuing. So for you, the question here is there a recurring theme, right? If the end of the year is a time that you're reflecting, do you notice that there's something that you are putting on your list for next year that you've been kind of pushing off already during the year of 2024? Are there certain personal or professional goals or problems that keep coming back, right? You think you're going to address it, but you don't address it. Maybe it's that you want to have more time with your family. Maybe it's that you want to advance professionally at work. You want to have better relationships with people who are in a position of authority, better relationships with your clients. Maybe you want to have more prestige or a more well-known reputation within your field. There are lots of things that you might be aspiring to where you feel like, okay, this was something I wanted to do last year and I haven't done it, right? So look at what has come up again, right? In your personal life, it might be your health. I know every year I have something that I'm thinking about in terms of health. I don't have any real health problems, but there are certain things that I'm monitoring. And I notice year to year, I'm like, that thing was really bothering me last year. What am I going to do about it this year that is different? And so when it comes to these recurring problems or these recurring opportunities or these returning guests, whatever you want to call them, this may mean that you are poised for a breakthrough. And the breakthrough may be that you're ready to deal with the underlying reason for the problem, right? And it could be, right? If it's something that you keep putting on your to-do list and it's just not getting done, it might be that the problem is you just need to stop putting that thing on your to-do list. You might need to give up on that as even being a goal for yourself, right? That might be part of the breakthrough. It may also mean that there's something there that's holding you back. There's an obstacle there, and that we need to figure out what that obstacle is, overcome it so that it's not holding you back in the future. Now, another area where you might find yourself poised for a breakthrough is growth, right? If you have grown in your practice, if you've grown professionally, you might have bumped up against a set point, right? Almost like an upper limit. I've talked about this before on the podcast, where you're pushing past, or you would be pushing past your zone of comfort. So what this can look like, right, is professionally, it might mean that you've been growing and then you reach a plateau, right? And you start to feel stuck. And if you've been feeling stuck for any period of time, you know how uncomfortable that can be. It can cause you to enter these decision loops where you're kind of undecided about what you want to do next. You might think of yourself as a plant inside of a pot, right? If you've ever had a potted plant that grows, right? A lot of my potted plants never make it to the growth stage. I'm afraid I don't have much of a green thumb. But if you're a good gardener and your potted plants start to grow, what you might notice is that their roots start to get really large and they start to outgrow the container, and you need to put them in a bigger plant potter. So that might be you, right? You might find that you are ready for the next level and that this is pushing you towards some sort of a breakthrough. Now, the third area where you might want to have a breakthrough is just because you want to, right? It may be that there's no pressing reason, but it's just something that you feel compelled to do, right? You want to do something differently. The analogy I would have for you here is, those people who want to compete in triathlons or those, high performance sporting events where it's like you're called to do this thing, right? For whatever reason, you've kind of got this idea in your mind, and so you want to do it. That can be a really wonderful opportunity for a breakthrough, right? So if you're thinking about it in terms of your practice, maybe it's going to the Supreme Court of Canada and arguing a case there. Maybe it's some other goal that has this this resonant appeal. There are all these different awards and recognitions that lawyers can be given. Maybe it's something like that. It's this ambitious goal that you have, and it just, for whatever reason, you just want it. And so that might be a reason for making this a breakthrough year. It's a year that you're going to accomplish that thing, or you're going to position yourself to accomplish it at some point in the future. Some of these are going to be longer term goals. So those are some areas that may suggest to you that it is time for a breakthrough. So that means that if you can think of something where you want to break through, right? You've been going through a cycle of dealing with the same problem over and over again, you're ready to move on, or you have reached this level of growth where you're ready for that next stage, or you're just excited about something that you could do in the future, and you want to design your breakthrough year, then you might be asking yourself, okay, so how do I go about doing that? And most people don't sit down and say, I want to design a breakthrough year. So you're one of the few, and I'm excited to have you because this is something that we can do together, right? If you think about New Year's resolutions, often we'll kind of make those resolutions. We're surrounded by people making them. And so we think, well, that's a great idea. I should probably make some too. And you might jot a few notes down on a piece of paper and forget about it. We're doing more than that today. We're going to think about how you can purposely create a breakthrough year for yourself. And I'm going to offer 3 steps to do that. Those steps are to define it, to find a way to give it your sustained attention, and then finally, commitment, right? Committing to that breakthrough and having the willingness to continue pursuing that goal and recalibrate if necessary. So we're going to talk a little bit more about each of these steps, starting with defining your goal. So when you want to define your breakthrough year, and hopefully by this time, listening to the conversation we've had so far, sorry, I guess it's not really a conversation because it's more me talking, but I'm imagining that you are answering the questions in your mind, right? When I'm talking about questions that you could reflect on, that you're applying this to your practice and you're thinking about what a breakthrough would look like for you. So let's get granular. Let's define that. If you were to have a breakthrough year in 2025, what does that mean to you? So you might set this up as a goal, right? What is a goal that you could achieve that would be a real breakthrough for you? And that's the first part of it, right? So if I think about breakthroughs that I've had over the course of my career, and I'm thinking more specifically in terms of since I've become a coach, some of the breakthroughs that I've had, well, number one, just deciding to go and leave a law profession, like being a practicing lawyer and becoming a coach. That year was a breakthrough year because it required me to have a shift in identity. It required me to do something that was very foreign to me, that was very uncomfortable, but something that I felt compelled to do. It also happened the year that I decided to launch this podcast, right? That was a breakthrough in the sense that I had to choose to do this thing that would put me out in the public, that I would need to create content and discuss and connection and all these things. That brought up a lot of fear. There were a lot of limiting beliefs, if you will. So that was a breakthrough year for me in the sense that I made a decision to do it. Another breakthrough year was the year I decided to start offering group coaching programs, right? Again, it was a big transition from what I had been doing previously, which was exclusively one-to-one coaching. I had been doing speaking, so it really was combining those two things. However, the idea of creating something and putting it out into the world and inviting people to join me specifically for this type of program, that was new. So these are some examples of goals that I set that required me to effectively have a breakthrough in terms of who I am as a professional and how I show up professionally. Now, there can also be personal breakthroughs. And I would say that this year for me has been very much a personal breakthrough type of year. There have been things happening outside of my professional world that have really required me to really question my beliefs, question my values, things that I thought were just how things were. And that has led to some personal breakthroughs. I don't think I'm done there. I think I've got more work and I know what those breakthroughs look like going forward. So for you, I would just invite you to reflect on what type of goals you might be setting, what type of breakthroughs you might want to have professionally and personally. That's the first part. Define it. What does it look like? The second part of the breakthrough is to get clear about the obstacles that you're going to need to overcome. So if the goal, for example, is to go and open your own practice, right? Maybe you're going from being a practitioner within a firm or organization and you want to go out on your own, you might think about all the obstacles that are going to show up for you, right? And what are those obstacles? There will be obstacles that are tangible. I need to figure out how to have my own website and do the accounting and the trust accounting for a law firm. I need to figure out how to market. I need to figure out who my clients are going to be. I need to figure out X, Y, Z. Will I hire other lawyers? Will I have employees, etc.? There's a lot that goes into a decision like that. And it doesn't have to be starting your own firm. This could be any big decision in your professional life. But the idea here is to make that goal or to think about that goal and what are the obstacles, right? So there's the tangible obstacles and what are the intangible obstacles, right? Again, that almost goes back to the self-concept, any limiting beliefs that you have. It might also be the way that you do things, right? Going back to that car or bicycle analogy where you're looking at the gears that you're operating in, you won't be able to do more of the same and expect a different result. It's actually doing things differently in a way that leads to a different outcome. So that's the first step then. If you're planning for a breakthrough year, you'll need to decide what your breakthrough is going to be. So what is the goal and what is the obstacle? What are the specific obstacles that you'll need to break through next year? So the second stage is to create a plan, right? Develop strategies that account for the time and effort that it's going to take and to plan realistically. So going back to that initial definition of breakthrough. Now, I had a little bit of a pause when it refers to sudden, right? A sudden development. And I would offer that a breakthrough often is sudden in the sense that it feels very sudden. The example you might often hear is where you have somebody who has been a smoker for life and they unfortunately receive a diagnosis of cancer. And that moment, everything shifts for them and they stop smoking, right? You might define that as a breakthrough in the sense that there's been a profound and fundamental shift in the way that person is, and they are able from that moment to do things very differently than how they did them before. So that's just an example. And I think for a breakthrough, what you might find is that there's a goal, right? There's something that will require the makings of a goal. In other words, defining what it is, creating a plan to achieve that goal, setting up the steps that are required to achieve that goal. There's going to be all this planning. You're going to have to give time to the goal. You're going to have to give focus, attention, all of those things. So the goal itself may take a considerable amount of time, right? If we go to the example, for example, of maybe it's having a case at the Supreme Court of Canada, that might not be a goal that happens overnight, right? It might take a lot of work to get the type of files that you need and develop the type of relationships to have just that one right case that, gets all the way there, et cetera. So there may be that there's a timeline that is inherent in the goal that you set for yourself. But what I would offer to you is that the breakthrough that you're seeking can happen suddenly in the course of you pursuing that goal, right? There may be a shift that you need to make in terms of who you are as a person, who you are as a professional. That who shift happens along the way to achieving the external goal. So that's something I'd invite you to think about is if you want to create that breakthrough year, there's going to be that planning in place, right? That idea of staying accountable to your goal and making space for the idea that there could be a breakthrough or more than one breakthrough along the way in the sense that we are talking about today, right? What are those shifts? What's going to be different? How are you going to go from pedaling faster at one gear to being in a completely different gear? What does that look like for you? And that will be different, of course, for everybody. Now, the third stage of planning for your breakthrough is to figure out how you're going to commit to seeing your goal through to the very end. Now, this process is really interesting because I would offer to you that from where you are today, you are going to plan this goal. And the further and bigger that goal is, the more obscure it is to you, in a sense, it's better for achieving a breakthrough because it may not be possible for you today to figure out how you're going to achieve that goal in the future. What that means is that you're going to create a plan. And your plan will inevitably fail because if you knew how to get there, you would be there already, right? You would have already achieved that goal. You would already be the person who has achieved that goal. So if it's prospective and you're not there yet, I would offer that it would make perfect sense that you would not know how to get to that goal at the end. You are going to have to figure out how to become the person who has the goal. So you're going to take steps. Some of those steps are going to get you closer. Some of those steps are going to fail, or they're not going to get you closer. You're not going to get what you thought that you were going to get. And the idea here then is that you're going to become the kind of person who still goes after that goal, who commits to seeing the goal all the way through to the end. And it's that transformation, that process that will create the breakthroughs for you, right? You're going to shift in who you are. And I would also offer that process, right? I mean, I love the idea of things being easy. Why not? Who doesn't, right? Okay, I'll make the plan, I'll follow steps A through C, and I'll get to my result. Wonderful. But I would offer that the challenges along the way, right? All those big obstacles, all the breakthroughs you're going to have, those are spaces and times where you're going to get stronger so that the person that you are by the time that you achieve the goal, by the time you're arguing in front of the highest justices of the country, you're ready for it. Because you've prepared for that, right? You've had a number of setbacks already. You know how to deal with them. You've had challenges already. You know how to deal with them. You feel like you're prepared to be that person who is doing that thing. That could be any goal that you're setting for yourself. So you want to develop the resilience and the skills that you need. And this is how you do it, by sticking to your goal and to following it through. And you might think about running a marathon, for example, and how it's something that we probably all could do, right? I mean, given that you've got a certain level of physical fitness, you could plug into ChatGPT or some other program a question: how do I train for a marathon in 6 months' time? And you will get a recipe for the things you need to do in order to run a marathon. But if you don't actually follow the recipe, if it just remains something that, maybe you post the schedule on your fridge door and you look at it, but you don't do it, you're never going to get there. You're never going to be that marathon runner. And so here, it's the exact same thing, right? You can create a plan, but if you're not actually taking the steps, then you're not gaining the training, the experience, you're not developing the muscle, you're not developing the stamina that it takes to have that goal. So summarizing the steps then is, if you want to have a breakthrough year, if you want to design a breakthrough year, number one, let's define what that looks like. What is the goal and what are the obstacles that you're going to need to overcome in order to have that breakthrough year? Number two, what is your plan for it? How are you going to create a plan that allows for you to have the space for your goals, so that you can take the steps towards your goal, create that accountability for your goal? And then finally, that commitment, that decision that no matter what, you're going to take every step possible that you can in order to achieve that thing over the course of the year. And whether or not you achieve the goal, if you stay on track, if you continue to take action toward that goal, I can almost guarantee that you are going to have the breakthroughs that you want to have over the course of the way. I say almost because if you're not confronting some of the obstacles, it's not going to happen, right? I think it really is through moving through the things that are difficult and challenging that help us grow, that help us have those breakthroughs. So you need to be doing those things. So why this will work, right? Why this planning of creating your breakthrough year, why is that going to work? Well, starting from the beginning, you don't need to have a breakthrough year. You really don't have to. It's something that you can choose, though. If you want to have it, then you can make it happen, right? You are in the driver's seat here. You get to define what that's going to look like for you. You get to define the obstacles that are currently holding you back that you want to clear out of the way. You're the one who's going to make time for it, make it a priority, and you're going to be that person who commits to seeing it through to the end, right? That is something that is entirely within your control. You get to be and become that person. The skills you're going to need, number one, is focus. Focus to sit down and do this work. If you want to join me at my webinar on December 19th, that will be a great opportunity for you to gain more clarity about what a breakthrough year will look like for you. So you'll need to be focused in terms of planning it out. You'll need to be determined in terms of taking steps to pursue it, and persevere, right? My mom used to say, persistent people begin their success where others end in failure. So you might find that you're running up against failures and you're going to make that choice to keep going in a different direction, right? Again, we're not pedaling faster. We're not pressing the gas pedal harder. We're shifting gears. It will require that strategic thinking. So if you choose to have a breakthrough year, again, you're going to want to think differently, right? You've probably heard that Einstein quote that you can't solve a problem with the same brain that created the problem. So we're going to be thinking about how you can problem solve differently in a way that will get you different results. You'll have that breakthrough. And finally, it's going to require that you have a certain amount of willingness for the breaking part of the breakthrough, right? If you think about what it means to have a breakthrough, when I think about a breakthrough, there's a spot along the way, right? It's almost like when you are about to have a really awkward conversation with somebody and you go and you dial their number in your phone and then you hit the button to actually place the call. And it's almost like this breathlessness. You know that you're about to do something. It's really foreign to you. It's uncomfortable. You don't know how it's going to unfold, and yet you're doing it anyways. And there's this period of time where you're in this awkward in-between. You're just unsettled. You're unanchored. And that is something that you'll need to be willing to experience. If what you want is to create a different result, you're going to need to go through this awkward transition period of kind of breaking away from where you are so that you can land on this other shore. It's something that is so, I think Martha Beck has probably explained it best. She talks about transitions and how there's this liminal stage where you're neither here nor there, and how awkward that can be, right? Because it's almost like you're swimming from one shore to another. And at some point between those two shores, you're in a spot where you can't see either shore and you don't know where you're going. So this may be part of your breakthrough experience. And in fact, I'd invite you to consider that it probably will be, right? You're going to need to change how you see things, how you operate. And that is a transition. And that willingness to go through that process is part of the process. Now, if you're willing to do all of this, then what you can create is that breakthrough year, right? If you think about where you'd love to be this time next year and what would be required of you to get there, imagine that feeling of satisfaction that you'll have. Imagine that feeling that will come to you as a result of all that, how you'll feel about what you've created externally, and also who you've become as a person. So that, my dear friend, is what I have to offer for you today. This idea of designing a breakthrough year and doing the things that are required in order to create it. If you would like to join me on December 19th, we will workshop this concept, and I would love to have you there with me. You will be able to ask questions and interact and all of that. So please do sign up. I'd love to have you there. That's December 19th. It's a Thursday at noon Pacific time. And if you've already decided, right, you want to have a breakthrough year and you want to have the support of a coach and a community of women lawyers who are also doing the same thing, who are also going after big goals in their practice, then by all means, sign up for my program. Join me there. If you have any questions about it, you're welcome to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to sign off for the day and invite you to reflect on that question. What would a breakthrough year look like for you in 2025? So with that, my dear, have a wonderful week and we'll reconnect again soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.